In today's episode of Notable, I sat down to talk with Jasmin Sethi, and through her story and experiences, I learned her perspective on the structure of board spaces and the accessibility to different industries and leadership roles as a person with a disability. Come join our conversation.
My name is Jasmin Sethi. I'm a blind South Asian woman. I identify as she/her. And I like to tell the story of how my family came over and just give a little quick bio that kind of explains a lot of my, I guess, a lot of my purpose and goals that I've chosen to pursue in life. My parents were immigrants from India. They came over to Canada in the 60s and then subsequently to the US. My parents were both sighted, but they were second cousins. And so they carried recessive genes for a retinal condition that both my sister and I inherited, retinitis pigmentosa. And my sister is 9 years older than I am. So they had already been kind of dealing with the diagnoses and kind of adapting, by the time I was born. And my parents had two very different ways of kind of handling disability. My dad's way was sort of the traditional Indian view for daughters, which was that he needed to earn a lot of money and have trust funds for us, and essentially, give us a dowry to, to put it quite bluntly, buy us a husband who would take care of us, because that's what traditionally happened.
Mm-hmm.
My mother, who had come from a family where there had been several widows, also domestic abuse, she really kind of understood this notion that you can't just depend on someone else. And she was empowered with education herself. She had a master's in mathematics, which was in great demand at the time in the US. And, really valued education and came from a culture of that. And so she had read an article about a blind psychiatrist when my sister was young. And she really took that approach to heart, that education was our freedom, our source of financial security. And my father passed suddenly of a heart attack when I was 5 and my sister was a teenager. And he left us in debt. So his trust fund dream did not come to fruition.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's dream basically had to prevail out of necessity. And so she was an Asian dragon mother, and she definitely pushed us. 95 wasn't good enough. You had to always do better in school. And so as a result of that, my sister did very well and went to University of Pennsylvania for college. So right here in Philly, had a Philly connection going all the way back. And then she went to Stanford for her PhD. And now she teaches at Columbia Business School, and she has a couple of books of her, her own fame and accomplishments. She's accomplished in her own right, an author of several books.
Mm-hmm.
And I was pushed, the bar was set high. I was pushed to, go further. And so I went to Harvard College. Harvard was deemed the only place that was going to be good enough, given that my sister went to Penn and in my family, as it were. And then I couldn't decide between a law degree and a PhD in economics. I had always been kind of interested in policy and different economic and legal issues. And so since I couldn't decide and my mom wasn't going to let me drop out of either, I ended up getting both. And so I always say it was my mom's desire for financial security and the Asian dragon mother that basically got me all that education at Harvard. And but I would say it's that struggle, that thinking about financial security, the fact that my mom really did struggle, but education kind of set us free, that really drove my passion for financial security. How do you improve access? How do you improve people's ability to create more secure lives, have access to building wealth? And that's been kind of the motivation for a lot of my work in my career and my personal, pro bono type activities.
Okay, yeah. I feel a bit of a kinship for your story because I also was an economics major. So every time I like that, the sort of passion for um policy and interest in that, I always relate to because it's also the thing that I kind of grappled with in my own career path and being like, um, do I want to go down that road or art? But I appreciate you for sharing all of that with me. Um, and yeah, just the drive for success, or that can come from being a person of color in this world. I think, I don't know, sometimes there's that push from the generation before to strive for better. Um, um, yeah, all of that just kind of resonates in parts of my own story as well. So I appreciate you for sharing all of that. I am curious now, um, as you have joined the board for Grounds for Sculpture, kind of where does art fit into your story and sculpture, and what kind of started that interest?
Well, art is another one I think, and I think your organization has talked about this, that there are differences in access based on wealth,
Mhm.
and of course, just, being fully able-bodied versus having a disability.
Mhm.
Grounds for Sculpture really impressed me because it is the most accessible art venue I have ever been to.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I came across them through a few friends and professional contacts. I think it was just earlier last year that I had, first experienced them, and in a few different occasions. And it was just very welcoming, the idea that you were able to touch so much of the art. Most of it uh, it is uh, you know permitted, particularly for people with disabilities, and a lot of it was designed with that kind of touching, the sort of, I guess, the wear and tear that might come with that, which hopefully is not much, but
Mhm.
service, because it's all outside, it is kind of designed with some wear and tear in mind. And so I really appreciated that. I thought it was this idea of universal access, right? This notion that you don't have to have this kind of hierarchical access for some who can access everything and others who can access very limited amounts. um so I think for me, art is, it's a form of wealth, right? And so it fits into this theme of access to opportunities that I don't believe should be limited to just a subset of the population.
Art is a form of wealth. Love that phrase. I Because it's so true. And yeah, it's very much written into the ethos of Artreach. Um, so yeah, that's absolutely absolutely spot on. I'm curious, um, outside of um Grounds for Sculpture, and that sort of particular art space, kind of more broadly, sort of growing up through your life, how have other art spaces made you feel?
So I think that when I was visiting in Europe, I felt it's more inclusive than on average than in the US. Not every venue, but I would say on average. So the big difference that I often comment on is that when you go to Grounds for Sculpture or you go to a museum in Europe, you can touch things on the spot. Okay. You can talk to someone and be cleared to touch things at certain venues. You can get a list of things you can touch at certain museums.
Mhm.
And they'll give you gloves, for instance, some of the European museums. And here in the US and a lot of the museums, you have to pre-arrange. And the pre-arranging can be rather bureaucratic. It can take a while, and you may or may not be able to have it arranged for when you visit.
Mhm.
And it's great that there are these tours who will, tour guides who will explain the art, but if you do happen to pop in without that arrangement, you can't touch things. So I think it's definitely an inclusivity versus a feeling left out. I guess FOMO might be the opposite feeling. So I
Mhm.
would say in some cases there's kind of a FOMO when you're with people, and then I might be with friends who give me different reactions, which is interesting, but I can't measure it against any experience of my own. Whereas if there is an audio tour available at least, or a touch experience, I have something of my own reference point, at least for, anything with tactile, for feeling it, and then the audios can help to get kind of a neutral description.
Has your relationship to art changed as you've grown up?
I guess as we all grow older, we, tend to just learn. I think I just have a little more exposure. I don't
Mhm.
know that my relationships changed, but I've gotten a little more exposure to different types of art. I'm no way an expert. I'm one of the non-art expert advisors on the Grounds for Sculpture Board. So I was brought in for, financial expertise and other things, but I
Mhm.
appreciate the art, but I'm definitely not, I don't have expertise to offer.
Transitioning into some of our more sort of board and leadership focused questions. Um, I'd love to know how you sort of view yourself as a leader. What qualities do you sort of lean on and rely on to be a leader, both within the your service on the Grounds for Sculpture board, but just also in your other professional experience as well.
Yeah, so my business is a consulting business that I've
Hmm.
had for the last 6 years, and I consult for various financial organizations. And I would say a lot of what I do there and in my board service is, having to be organized and proactive. I think those are my strengths. I'm very organized. I'm very obsessed with being organized. I'm very list oriented. And I don't like to wait around for direction. So, but what I like about working for myself is not being told what to do. But the way you avoid that is you get ahead of what your clients need, and you kind of think about, as much as you can, what it is they're going to need you to do, and propose it yourself. This is what I think would be helpful for this project. And then they can react to that. And that gives you a lot more control over the nature of the work, the timing of the work, proactive rather than reactive. So I think that's key
Hmm.
for me. And then I think with those being proactive and organized, comes other things, collaborating and being collaborative, getting people's input, all the other things that we think of as necessary in leading in any organization.
How much uh, board experience specifically have you had? Is Grounds for Sculpture um, one of many boards that you're on currently, or is this sort of your first foray into board service?
It is not my first. I think now I'm on, I guess technically three nonprofit boards, and then two sort of government advisory committees, which kind of function similarly to
Hmm.
boards. Um, so I'm on Grounds for Sculpture, the Pension Action Center, which deals with retirement accounts, the Harvard Club of Philadelphia. Those are the three nonprofit boards. And then I sit on two advisory committees, the Securities and Exchange Commission Small Business Advisory Committee. I used to work at the SEC a long time ago, and also for FINRA, the Market Regulation Committee.
You're no stranger to this work.
Right.
Um, so I'd love to know if you can think back to the first time you sat in a board meeting, in your life. Do you remember how it felt? And maybe what surprised you about board service and what it means to be on a board of directors?
Well, I think for my first one was probably the Pension Action Center. But I would say every first meeting for every new board is similar, where there's definitely a feeling of, what am I doing here? Does everybody else know what they're doing and I don't? What am I supposed to be doing? Kind of understanding the materials, understanding the history of the institution, the reports. So there is a general feeling of, you know, almost like an imposter syndrome, like how can I benefit this organization that I'm just coming into and it's been around for, however long. Um, so there's definitely that, but there's also a certain freshness of curiosity, I think, when you look at it, which is what they're looking for, right? There's a certain, okay, well, why? Why are things this way? Why haven't done them this other way? And there may be perfectly good reasons that, can't really be changed, but sometimes there are reasons that just need a fresh perspective. And I think that's important for people to remember.
Yeah, the concept of innovation and board service. I don't I don't know if on a personal note, I don't know if I associate those two things very often, but that's coming from somebody who has never served on a board before. So I'm kind of curious how you go about maybe advocating for innovation. Like, what's your tactic to kind of get a board kind of moving in a maybe more new or different way?
How do you look at something in a new or different way?
Yeah, and maybe how you also encourage other fellow board members to engage in a new or different way.
So the second is hard. I'm not gonna lie. I've been most likely to look at this with investments, for instance. I was one of the key drafters for the investment policy for the Harvard Club of Philadelphia, which previously did not have one. There was no real investments, it was just cash. So that was a success. There was a subset of the board that was supportive of taking a new approach. So I think that was key. There were definitely people on the board who didn't necessarily want to change how things were being done. So I think part of how you take a fresh look is you do need to look at, what is the current situation? What are the needs and goals? And then you do have to get some supporters before you even go to the whole board with, something,
Right.
some kind of concrete proposal.
Yeah. So kind of going a little bit now into kind of your experience as a person with a disability, kind of joining a board. I'm curious to know about um, how you advocate for maybe some of your accessibility needs in that space and what that experience has been like in your various board service experiences.
I've learned through working on different boards what I need. There are some times when I do take in a member of my team into meetings, not for all board meetings, but for some of them. Depending also if it's in person or virtual. So I have, brought that up early on. I haven't really found resistance in general. I think it's mostly just kind of figuring out what I need and speaking up to ask for it. Yes, I think boards are fairly responsive at that level to needs.
I mean that's good. We do love to hear that. You know, uh it's really easy to be accessible. Like if you have the right spirit and mindset behind it, it can be very simple. So I like I appreciate that spaces are able to do that when they are. Um, um, so I am curious to know maybe about your most recent experience, sort of joining Grounds for Sculpture. What the onboarding process for joining a board is, and how that felt for you.
Grounds for Sculpture, I think, has actually evolved their process over time. So I actually got assigned a mentor, which was nice. I don't think they always did that. That's, I think, relatively new. Um, and so that, yes, that was great because you have someone you can ask questions to. They're also trying to make more information digital, like different events, our profiles. So I think they've actually been getting more organized, and I think that's been easier than some of the other boards. I would say some of my others before that were a bit less structured.
Mm,
Also, like one of them has only been virtual for a long time, and we're may finally meet in person later this year, and that I think isn't as great for building rapport with other board members. I feel
mm.
less connected, I think, to that board because of that. So I do think, yeah, having the in person, at least for me, has mattered.
In the board experiences that you've had, does your organization have rules, whether they're explicit rules or implicit rules around um, the appearance or etiquette of their board members? And sort of how have you learned about those rules, and how have you how's your experience been navigating those rules?
For any of the boards that I'm on, you're saying, do they have any such
Yeah.
rules?
Hmm.
Not so much that's been talked about. I guess people haven't really done anything to warrant it. I mean, the most rules are around the government ones, but that's mostly just to make sure that there's no appearance of conflict.
Hmm.
No one's bribing us to try to influence the government, things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I would say the nonprofit boards have not had so much of that, but I think it's because there hasn't really been a need.
When you think about sort of presenting yourself, how do you like to present yourself? What do you want people to notice when they first meet you?
I think I am very proud of my education, so I do, um, that does often come up either in my bio or when I'm talking, just when I do speak to people, what I speak about. So I think kind of, yeah, I perceive myself as being articulate, having well thought out opinions. And that is something that I do try to present and hope that people will appreciate.
Mhm.
I think just being generally well put together, try not to be somebody who's, you know, both appearance wise and just generally demeanor wise, being how do you put it, kind of scattered or whatever. I try to be kind
Yeah.
of well put together. Well, or if I think it fits with the organized theme,
Mhm.
sort of organized in appearance, organized in thought, organized in speech. I think that would be kind of my motto.
When you approach a board meeting, how do you sort of prepare yourself to enter that space?
I do look at the materials, and this is something I've actually worked on. I think in the beginning I didn't necessarily know how to prepare for board meetings, but I
Mhm.
think as I've been doing more meetings, I've kind of learned that, when you're going through the materials, really noting down what questions I have, particularly in areas where I might be able to offer a suggestion or input. So, I do tend to focus on financial materials for several of my boards, because I have knowledge regarding investments and investment strategy, things like that.
Mhm.
But also even, other things that I've gotten experience. I've done some event planning for the Harvard Club board. So even for Grounds for Sculpture, I may have thoughts around events and promotion. So I tend to focus on, more on the areas where I can give potential input and make sure I understand the various issues.
What is your experience like with board policy creation? How active are you in creating the policies that govern the board that you're on?
So the investment policy is what I worked on with the Harvard Club of Philadelphia, and I am on the committee, the investment committee for the grounds for sculpture. So if we do decide to make any changes, I would be involved with that. Right now we haven't. I don't think I've made other governance policies there. Yeah, I think for the other advisory committees and boards I'm on, pretty much the policies are already, kind of well established.
Thank you again so much for all of your time, your energy, your thoughtful answers to the questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much, Jasmine, and I will talk to you again soon.
Okay.
All right,
Bye.
bye.